The sound that woke me wasn't Beth's whispered phone conversation. It was the creak of our bedroom floorboards as she tiptoed toward the bathroom at 2:30 in the morning. Again. I kept my breathing steady, eyes closed, listening to her muffled voice through the bathroom door. This was the 4th time this month I'd caught her sneaking around for these mysterious late-night calls. My wife of 8 years, the woman who used to fall asleep watching Netflix by 9:30, was suddenly a night owl with urgent conversations that couldn't wait until morning. I know, she whispered, her voice barely audible through the door. Eddie's been asking questions about my schedule. Eddie, that would be me, the husband who apparently warranted discussion during clandestine bathroom conferences. I slipped out of bed and moved closer to the door, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. 20 years of electrical work had taught me how to move quietly through a house. You learn to avoid squeaky spots when you're trying not to wake a client's baby while fixing their wiring. He's getting suspicious, Beth continued. Maybe we should cool it for a while. Cool what? I pressed my ear against the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. No, John, I can't just tell him I'm going to book club every Tuesday. He knows I hate reading. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. John. There was only one John in our lives who would warrant this level of secrecy, this level of careful planning and whispered conversations. My brother. I backed away from the door and returned to bed, pulling the covers up to my chin. When Beth emerged 5 minutes later, I was the picture of peaceful sleep. She slid back into bed beside me, and I felt her studying my face in the darkness, probably wondering if I'd heard anything. Eddie? She whispered. I mumbled something incoherent and rolled over, giving her my back. Inside, my mind was racing. John Tate, my older brother by 3 years, my business partner, the golden boy who'd always gotten everything he wanted without trying. And now, apparently, he wanted my wife. The pieces started falling into place with sickening clarity. Beth's sudden interest in yoga classes that ran late into the evening. The new clothes she'd been buying. More revealing outfits that she said were for boosting her confidence. The way John had been acting during our weekly business meetings. Distracted, guilty, unable to meet my eyes. The way he'd started asking casual questions about my marriage. How are things with you and Beth? He'd asked just last week. You guys seem a little distant lately. I'd thought he was being a concerned brother. What a joke. I lay there until dawn, staring at the ceiling, planning. By the time Beth's alarm went off at 6:30, I knew exactly what I was going to do. She kissed my cheek before getting up, the kiss of Judas, I thought grimly, and headed for the shower. While she was washing her hair, I found her second phone. It was tucked inside her purse, a cheap prepaid smartphone hidden beneath her wallet and makeup bag. The kind of phone you buy when you don't want calls showing up on the family plan. My hands shook as I powered it on, but it was password protected. I tried her birthday. Nothing. Our anniversary. Nothing. Then, on a hunch born of pure spite, I tried John's birthday. The phone unlocked. The text messages told the whole story. 3 months of secret meetings, stolen afternoons, declarations of love and lust that made my stomach turn. Photos I'd never wanted to see of my wife in positions I'd forgotten she knew. And worse, much worse, were the messages about me. Eddie's so clueless, she'd written just 2 days ago. Sometimes I think he wouldn't notice if I moved out completely. John's response, maybe it's time to find out. You deserve better than a guy who comes home covered in electrical tape every night. I took screenshots of everything with my own phone, then carefully placed her device back where I'd found it. By the time Beth came out of the bathroom, towel wrapped around her hair, I was making coffee in the kitchen like nothing had happened. Morning, honey, she said, kissing my cheek again. The casual affection felt like a slap. Morning, I replied, handing her a mug. Sleep well? Like a baby. She smiled, and I wondered how I'd never noticed how easily she lied. You? Best night's sleep I've had in months, I said, and meant it. Nothing clears your head like finally understanding what you're dealing with. She left for her yoga class, which I now knew was actually an afternoon rendezvous at John's apartment across town, and I sat at our kitchen table, drinking coffee and planning the complete destruction of both their lives. Some people might have confronted them immediately, let emotion drive their decisions, but I'd learned patience in my line of work. Electrical systems are unforgiving of hasty decisions. One wrong move, one moment of carelessness, and you get burned. The smart electrician takes his time, studies the problem, and then fixes it properly. I was going to fix this properly. Tate Brothers Electrical had been our family's business for 15 years. John and I had built it from nothing after our father's construction company went under, starting with residential service calls and growing into commercial contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. We employed 12 people now, had a reputation for quality work, and had more business than we could handle. John had always been the face of the company, the smooth talker who landed the big contracts and schmooze with clients. I was the technical guy, the one who actually knew how to wire a building and manage the crews. It was a partnership that worked, or at least I thought it did. Now I understood why John had been pushing so hard lately for us to restructure the business. He'd been dropping hints about buying me out, suggesting I might be happier working for someone else. I'd thought it was just his way of dealing with midlife restlessness. I should have known better. John had never been content with half of anything. Our weekly meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning at 9. I arrived at the office early, letting myself into the small suite we rented in a converted warehouse downtown. Joanne, our office manager, wouldn't be in until 8:30, which gave me time to do some investigating. John's computer was password protected, but he'd always been lazy about security. His password was the same one he'd used since high school, Mustang 67, after his beloved classic car. Some things never change. His email told an interesting story. Over the past 2 months, he'd been in contact with several of our biggest clients, suggesting they might want to work exclusively with the technical side of Tate Brothers, meaning him. He'd been positioning himself to squeeze me out of my own company while sleeping with my wife. I forwarded the relevant emails to my personal account, then cleared the sent folder so he wouldn't know what I'd found. By the time Joanne arrived with her usual cheerful, "Good morning, Eddie," I was sitting at my own desk, reviewing legitimate project files. "John's running late," she said, hanging up her coat. "He called to say he'd be here by 10. "No problem," I said. "Gives me time to catch up on paperwork." Joanne had been with us for 8 years, since we'd grown big enough to need someone to handle the phones and scheduling. She was sharp, observant, and fiercely loyal to the company. More importantly, she'd always liked me better than John, though she was too professional to say so directly. "Eddie," she said carefully, "can I ask you something?" "Shoot." "Is everything okay with John lately?" "He's been acting strange, distracted, and he's been taking a lot of long lunches." I looked up from my files. "Strange how?" "Secretive. He's been making phone calls with his door closed, which he never used to do. And yesterday I saw him deleting emails right after he read them." She paused, then added, "I probably shouldn't be telling you this. Joanne, you've been keeping this company running for 8 years. If something's bothering you, I want to know about it." She sat down across from my desk. "I think John's planning something that doesn't include you." "What makes you say that?" "Last week a lawyer called asking about the company's ownership structure. John took the call in his office with the door closed, but I could hear him talking about dissolving partnerships and asset division. When I asked him about it later, he said it was just a routine consultation." My jaw clenched. "Did you catch the lawyer's name?" "Davidson and Associates, downtown firm. I made a note of it. Thanks for telling me, Joanne. Keep this between us for now, okay?" "Of course." She hesitated, then added, "Eddie, I hope you know that whatever John's planning, most of the crew would stick with you. You're the one who actually knows how to run jobs, And everyone respects that. It was a small comfort, but I appreciated it. At least I'd have some allies when this whole thing exploded. John finally showed up at 10:15, breezing through the door with his usual confident smile. He was a good-looking guy, I had to admit, tall, athletic, with the kind of easy charm that made people want to like him. He'd always been the popular one, the one who got the girls and the attention. The fact that he'd apparently decided to take mine too shouldn't have surprised me. "Sorry I'm late," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Traffic was murder." "No problem. I was just reviewing the Morrison project files." "Right, Morrison." He pulled out his phone and started scrolling through messages. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about that." "Oh." "I think we should consider subcontracting the electrical work to Patterson Electric. Focus our efforts on the bigger commercial jobs coming down the pipeline." I stared at him. The Morrison project was a $200,000 residential development, exactly the kind of steady, profitable work that kept our company afloat. Why would we subcontract work we can handle ourselves? "Efficiency," John said, not looking up from his phone. "We're spread too thin as it is." "We're spread thin because you've been taking long lunches and leaving early," I said evenly. That got his attention. His eyes snapped up to meet mine, and for a moment, I saw something like panic flicker across his face. "I've been networking," he said. "Building relationships with potential clients." Is that what we're calling it now? The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken accusations. John's phone buzzed with a text message, and I saw him glance at it reflexively. Even from across the desk, I could see it was from Beth. "Can't wait to see you this afternoon," the preview text read. John quickly flipped the phone face down, but it was too late. He knew I'd seen it. "Eddie, don't." I stood up, my chair rolling backward. "Just don't. It's not what you think." "Really? Then why don't you tell me what it is?" He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I remembered from childhood. John had always been a terrible liar when confronted directly. "Look, Beth and we've been talking." "She's been unhappy, Eddie. Really unhappy. She needed someone to listen. And you volunteered to listen. How generous of you." "It just happened. We didn't plan it." "Bullshit." I walked around the desk, stopping directly in front of him. "You've been planning this for months. The late meetings, the talk about restructuring the business, the lawyer consultations. You want everything, don't you, John? The company, my wife, my life." He stood up, and for a moment I thought he might actually try to fight me. John had 3 inches and 20 pounds on me, but he'd gone soft over the years. I was still lean and strong from physical work. "She doesn't love you anymore," he said quietly. Maybe she never did. It was a low blow, designed to hurt, and it worked. But I'd been expecting it. "Maybe not," I said. "But she's going to learn what it feels like to lose everything she does love. And so are you." I walked back to my desk and sat down, picking up the Morrison files like nothing had happened. "I think we should table the restructuring discussion for now," I said conversationally. "Focus on current projects. Speaking of which, you should probably get to the Riverside job site. The crew's been waiting for you since 8. John stared at me for a long moment, probably trying to figure out exactly how much I knew. Then he grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. "This isn't over, Eddie." "No," I agreed. "It's not." After he left, I sat in the silence of the office, listening to Joanne's fingers clicking on her keyboard in the next room. My hands were shaking slightly from adrenaline, but my mind was clear. John was right about one thing. This wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. The Copper Wire was the kind of bar where electrical contractors went to complain about customers, compare war stories, and drink beer that came in bottles, not craft cocktails with names like Sparkling Sunset Surprise. It had been my refuge for years, the place I went when I needed to think or just wanted to be around people who understood what it meant to work with their hands for a living. Dale Morrison, no relation to our Morrison Project clients, had owned the place for 20 years. He was a former electrician himself, forced into early retirement after a job site accident left him with a permanent limp and a settlement check that he'd used to buy the bar. Dale was the kind of bartender who listened more than he talked, remembered everyone's usual drink, and had an uncanny ability to sense when someone needed to be left alone versus when they needed to talk. I'd been coming to the Copper Wire every Friday after work for the past 5 years. It was my routine, my way of transitioning from work week to weekend. Beth had never complained about it, probably because it gave her more opportunities to sneak around with John. Tonight, I needed Dale's perspective on something, and I knew he'd give it to me straight. "You look like hell," Dale said, as I settled onto my usual stool at the end of the bar. He was already reaching for a bottle of Budweiser before I'd even ordered. "Thanks. You always know just what to say to make a guy feel better." "It's a gift." He popped the cap and slid the bottle across the bar. "Woman trouble or work trouble?" "Both. They're related." Dale nodded knowingly. "That's the worst kind. Want to talk about it, or are you just here to drink?" I took a long pull of beer, considering. Dale had seen a lot in his years behind the bar: cheating spouses, business partnerships gone bad, family feuds that destroyed decades of relationships. If anyone would understand what I was dealing with, it was him. "Hypothetically," I said, "if you found out your business partner was trying to screw you out of your company while sleeping with your wife, what would you do?" Dale didn't even blink. "Hypothetically, I'd make sure I screwed them first, harder, and more permanently." "Even if the business partner was your brother?" "Especially if he was my brother. Family's supposed to mean something. When it doesn't, the betrayal cuts deeper." Dale leaned against the bar, studying my face. "This isn't hypothetical, is it?" "Nope." "John and Beth?" I nodded. Dale had met both of them over the years. John had come to the bar a few times, though he'd always acted like he was slumming it. Beth had picked me up here occasionally when my truck was in the shop. "Can't say I'm surprised about John," Dale said. "He always struck me as the type who thought the world owed him something." "But Beth, I thought she was smarter than that." "Apparently not. What's your plan?" "I'm working on it, but I want to make sure I do this right. No coming back from it, you know." Dale nodded slowly. "You want some advice from an old guy who's seen this movie before?" "Shoot. Don't do anything illegal. Don't do anything violent. But everything else? Fair game. They chose to blow up your life, so you get to choose how to blow up theirs." "What about forgiveness? Moving on? Taking the high road?" Dale snorted. "The high road's overrated. Sometimes people need to learn that actions have consequences. Sounds like your wife and brother never learned that lesson." We drank in comfortable silence for a while, watching the local news on the TV above the bar. A story came on about a charity gala being planned for the following month, some fundraiser for the children's hospital that all the local business owners were expected to attend. I made a mental note of the date. "You know what your biggest advantage is?" Dale said suddenly. "What's that?" "They think you're stupid. John's always acted like he was the smart one, the business brain. Beth probably thinks you're too trusting to ever suspect anything. They're not being careful because they don't think they need to be." He was right. I'd always been the quiet brother, the one who worked with his hands instead of his mouth. People underestimated me constantly, clients, competitors, apparently even my own family. "They have no idea what's coming," I said. "That's the spirit." "Another beer?" "Better not. I need to keep a clear head." I left a 20 on the bar and headed for the door. As I was leaving, Dale called out to me. "Eddie? Whatever you're planning, make sure it's something you can live with afterward. Revenge is satisfying, but it's not worth destroying yourself over." "Don't worry," I said. "I'm not planning to destroy myself. Just them." The drive home took me past John's apartment complex, and on impulse, I pulled into the parking lot. Sure enough, Beth's car was parked in the visitors section, tucked between a pickup truck and a minivan like she was trying to hide it. I sat in my truck for a few minutes, staring at her silver Honda Accord, thinking about all the lies she'd told me over the past few months. All the times she'd kissed me goodbye before leaving for her yoga classes or book clubs or girls' nights out. All the times she'd come home and asked about my day, playing the role of the concerned wife while planning to leave me for my own brother. My phone buzzed with a text message, from Beth, of course. Working late tonight at the studio. Don't wait up. Love you. I screenshot the message, adding it to my growing collection of evidence. Then I drove home to our empty house, poured myself a whiskey, and started planning phase 2 of John and Beth's education in consequences. By the time I went to bed, I had a detailed strategy mapped out. It was going to take patience, careful timing, and a willingness to burn some bridges. But when I was done, everyone in town would know exactly what kind of people my wife and brother really were. And they'd never be able to show their faces here again. The key to any good electrical job is preparation. You don't just start ripping out old wiring and hope for the best. You study the existing system, identify the problems, and plan your approach carefully. Rush the job, and you'll end up with a fire hazard or a system that fails when you need it most. I applied the same methodology to destroying John and Beth's lives. First, I needed allies, people who could help me when the time came, or at least wouldn't work against me. Joanne was already on my side, suspicious of John's recent behavior and loyal to me personally. Carl Hendricks, our senior foreman, was another obvious choice. He'd been with us since the beginning and had never liked John's tendency to take credit for other people's work. I approached Carl on Monday morning at the Riverside job site. He was supervising the installation of a new electrical panel, his weathered hands steady as he guided one of our newer guys through the process. Looking good, I told him, checking the work. Right on schedule? Should be done by Wednesday, Carl said, assuming we don't get any more surprise visits from the building inspector. John been by today? Carl snorted. John hasn't been by a job site in 3 weeks. Too busy with his client meetings, I guess. I studied Carl's face. He was a straight shooter, the kind of guy who'd worked construction his whole life and had no patience for bullshit. If anyone would understand what I was dealing with, it was him. Carl, can I ask you something? Man to man? Shoot. If you found out someone was trying to steal your life's work, what would you do about it? Carl set down his wire strippers and looked at me directly. Depends on who it was and how they were doing it. But I'd probably make sure they regretted it. Even if it was family? Especially if it was family. Family's supposed to have your back, not stick a knife in it. I nodded. Good to know where you stand. Eddie, is there something I should know about? Something that's going to affect the crew? Maybe. I can't say much right now, but if things go sideways with the business partnership, I want you to know that I'll take care of the guys. Nobody's going to lose their job because of John's stupidity. Carl studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Whatever you need, boss. You've always been straight with us. That was one ally secured. Next, I needed to start documenting everything. I opened a new bank account at a different institution, one where John couldn't access the records even if he tried. I transferred enough money to cover several months of expenses, not enough to trigger any automatic alerts on our joint accounts, but enough to ensure I wouldn't be left high and dry if Beth tried to clean me out. I also made an appointment with Tom Bradley, the best divorce attorney in town. Tom had handled the dissolution of several other electrical contractors' marriages, and he understood the complexities of dividing up a family business. How long have you suspected the affair? Tom asked during our consultation. Confirmed it last week, but I've been suspicious for months. Any children? No. We talked about it, but Beth always wanted to wait until we were more financially stable. I laughed bitterly. Now I know she was just waiting until she could find someone better. Tom made notes on a legal pad. What about the business? Joint ownership with your brother? 50-50 partnership. We both signed the original incorporation papers. That's going to complicate things, especially if he's involved with your wife. How so? Well, if you divorce Beth and she ends up with John, there's a potential conflict of interest. She might be entitled to a portion of your business assets as part of the settlement, which would effectively give John control of the company. I felt my jaw clench. Can we prevent that? There are strategies, but they work better if we can prove the affair started before any separation proceedings. Do you have evidence? I pulled out my phone and showed him some of the screenshots I'd taken. Tom's eyebrows rose as he scrolled through the messages. This is good, he said. Very good. Adultery isn't grounds for divorce in this state anymore, but it can still affect asset division, especially if we can show that the affair influenced business decisions. What do you mean? If John was trying to push you out of the company to benefit his relationship with your wife, that could be considered a breach of fiduciary duty. We might be able to use that to protect your business interests. I left Tom's office feeling more confident about the legal aspects of my situation, but I wasn't planning to rely solely on lawyers and courts to get my revenge. John and Beth had humiliated me privately. I was going to return the favor publicly. That evening, I drove to Beth's yoga studio, not to confront anyone, just to confirm what I already knew. Sure enough, there was no evening class scheduled. The studio was dark, the parking lot empty except for a maintenance truck. I took photos of the empty building, the posted schedule showing no classes after 6 p.m., the darkened windows. More evidence for my growing file. My phone rang as I was driving home. Beth checking in from her imaginary yoga class. "Hi, honey," she said, slightly breathless. "Just finished an amazing session." Feeling so relaxed. "That's great," I said. "What kind of poses did you work on tonight?" "Oh, the usual. Downward dog, warrior pose, that sort of thing." "Sounds challenging." "It was. I'm going to grab dinner with some of the other students, so don't wait up for me." "Sure thing. Have fun." After she hung up, I sat in my truck outside our house, staring at the windows of what had been our home for 8 years. Soon, it would just be a house again, another asset to be divided up, another piece of the life we'd built together to be sold off and forgotten. But that was okay. I was building something new now. Something that would last long after John and Beth had slunk out of town in shame. I was building their complete and total destruction. The confrontation I'd been dreading and anticipating finally came on a Thursday afternoon. I'd been expecting it ever since my conversation with John at the office the previous week. He'd been acting increasingly paranoid, checking his phone constantly and jumping every time someone walked into a room. Beth had been even worse, overcompensating with excessive affection and constant chatter about meaningless topics. They both knew I was suspicious. They just didn't know how much I actually knew. I was at home, reviewing some project estimates in my home office, when Beth came in carrying 2 cups of coffee. She set one down next to my laptop and perched on the edge of my desk, trying to look casual. "Eddie, we need to talk." "About what?" I didn't look up from my computer screen. "About us. About our marriage." Now I looked at her. She was wearing a new dress I'd never seen before. Black, form-fitting, expensive. The kind of outfit you wear when you want to look good for someone, just not for your husband. "What about our marriage?" She took a deep breath. "I think we should separate." "Interesting timing," I said. "Any particular reason?" "We've grown apart. We want different things. I need space to figure out who I am outside of this relationship." It was such complete bullshit that I almost laughed. Instead, I saved the document I'd been working on and closed my laptop. "And you figured this out just now, today?" "I've been thinking about it for months." "While you were at yoga class?" Something flickered in her eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just wondering if all that stretching and meditation gave you clarity about our relationship." She stood up, pacing to the window. "Don't be sarcastic, Eddie. This is hard enough. Hard for who? You? Or John? The color drained from her face. What? You heard me. I don't know what you're talking about. I opened my laptop again and pulled up the folder where I'd been saving screenshots of her text messages. I turned the screen toward her. Tuesday, 2:47 p.m. Can't wait to feel your hands on me again. Wednesday, 11:23 a.m. Eddie's working late tonight. Your place or mine? Yesterday, 4:15 p.m. I'm going to tell him soon. I can't keep pretending. Beth stared at the screen, her face cycling through shock, anger, and something that might have been relief. How long have you known? She asked quietly. Long enough. Eddie, Save it. I closed the laptop again. You want a separation? Fine. You can move out tonight. Tonight? Eddie, be reasonable. I need time to find a place to... John's got a place. I'm sure he'll be happy to have you. The front door opened and closed downstairs. Heavy footsteps on the stairs, John's footsteps. Beth must have called him when she decided to have this conversation. In here, I called out. John appeared in the doorway, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. His usual confidence was nowhere to be seen, replaced by the nervous energy of a man who knew he'd been caught. Eddie, he said, I think we should all sit down and talk about this like adults. Adults? I stood up, facing both of them. Adults don't sneak around behind their brother's back. Adults don't lie to their husband's face for months. Adults don't try to take someone's business while they're involved with his wife. It's not like that, John said. Then what's it like? John and Beth exchanged a look, some kind of silent communication that made my stomach turn. We didn't plan this, Beth said. It just happened. Bullshit. I've seen the messages, Beth. 3 months of planning and scheming, 3 months of laughing about how clueless I am. We never laughed at you, John said. No? Then what would you call it? I pulled out my phone and read from one of their text exchanges. Eddie's so wrapped up in his work he doesn't even notice I'm gone half the time. Maybe that's because he doesn't really care. Or maybe he's just not very bright. John had the grace to look ashamed. Beth just looked angry. You went through my private messages? Your private messages? You're my wife. You were planning to leave me for my brother, and you're worried about privacy? You had no right. I had every right. This is my house, my marriage, my life you two were planning to destroy. The room fell silent except for the sound of our breathing. John was staring at the floor. Beth was glaring at me like I was the one who'd done something wrong. So, what happens now? John asked. Now? Now you both get exactly what you deserve. What's that supposed to mean? Beth demanded. I smiled, and it must have been a cold expression because she actually took a step backward. It means you wanted everyone to know how unhappy you were with me, Beth. How you deserved better. Well, you're going to get your wish. Everyone's going to know. Eddie, don't do anything stupid, John said. Stupid? Like trusting my brother? Like believing my wife when she said she loved me? I think I've done enough stupid things already. I walked past both of them, heading for the stairs. Where are you going? Beth called after me. Out. When I get back, I want you gone. Both of you. Eddie, wait, John started after me. We need to talk about the business. I turned around so fast he almost ran into me. The business? You mean the business you've been trying to steal from me? The business you've been sabotaging while you were screwing my wife? I never sabotaged anything. The Morrison contract? The suggestions to subcontract our own work? The meetings with lawyers about dissolving partnerships? John's face went pale. How did you know about that? Same way I know about everything else, John. I pay attention. Something you never gave me credit for. I left them standing in my office and walked out of the house I'd lived in for 8 years. Behind me, I could hear Beth crying and John trying to comfort her. Let them comfort each other. They were going to need it, because I was just getting started. The charity gala for the Children's Hospital was the social event of the year in our town. Every business owner, city council member, and local celebrity would be there, dressed in their finest clothes and writing checks to demonstrate their civic responsibility. It was exactly the kind of event that John loved, a chance to network, schmooze, and play the role of successful entrepreneur. It was also the perfect venue for my revenge. I'd spent 2 weeks preparing for this night, calling in favors and setting up the pieces of my plan. Joanne had been invaluable, using her connections in the local business community to gather information and plant seeds of gossip. Carl had helped by spreading word among the construction crews about John's recent behavior and mysterious absences from job sites. But the real masterstroke had come from an unexpected source: Sierra Valdez, Beth's supposed best friend. I'd approached Sierra carefully, knowing that she was the biggest gossip in town and had always been secretly jealous of Beth's marriage and lifestyle. It hadn't taken much to turn her against her former friend, just a few carefully chosen revelations about what Beth had really been saying about her behind her back. She called me pathetic, Sierra had said, her eyes blazing with hurt and anger. Said I was desperate for attention and that's why I couldn't keep a man. I'm sorry, I'd told her. I thought you should know what kind of person you were defending. What do you need me to do? Now, standing in the ballroom of the Marriott Hotel, watching John and Beth work the crowd like the power couple they imagined themselves to be, I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. They had no idea what was coming. John was wearing his best suit, the charcoal gray one he'd bought for our father's funeral. Beth was stunning in a red dress that probably cost more than most people made in a week. They looked happy, confident, untouchable. That was about to change. I'd timed my arrival for maximum impact, walking in just as the formal program was beginning. The room was packed with everyone who mattered in our small city's business community. Mayor Davidson was there, along with the City Council and the Chamber of Commerce Board. Every electrical contractor, plumber, and construction company owner in town had bought tickets to this thing. Perfect audience for what I had planned. Ladies and gentlemen, the Master of Ceremonies announced from the podium, we'd like to thank our sponsors for making tonight possible. Let's give a round of applause for Tate Brothers Electrical, represented tonight by John and Beth Tate. The applause was polite, but enthusiastic. John stood up at his table near the front of the room, waving to acknowledge the recognition. Beth beamed beside him, playing the role of supportive partner. I waited until the applause died down, then stood up from my table in the back of the room. "Excuse me," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. "I think there's been a mistake." Every head in the room turned toward me. John's face went white. Beth looked like she was going to be sick. "I'm Eddie Tate," I continued, walking slowly toward the front of the room, "co-owner of Tate Brothers Electrical, and I think everyone here should know exactly what kind of people they're applauding." "Eddie, don't," John said, but his voice was weak, pleading. "Don't what? Don't tell them how you've been stealing clients behind my back? Don't mention how you've been trying to force me out of the company I helped build? Or maybe I shouldn't talk about how you've been sleeping with my wife for the past 3 months?" The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Beth buried her face in her hands. John stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "That's enough," he said. "No, John. It's not nearly enough." I reached the front of the room and turned to face the crowd. Hundreds of faces stared back at me, shocked and fascinated by the drama unfolding in front of them. "My wife and my brother thought they were so clever," I said conversationally, sneaking around, making plans, laughing about how stupid I was. They thought I'd never figure it out. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the room's audio-visual system. The large screens around the ballroom lit up with text messages, John and Beth's text messages, the ones I'd been collecting for weeks. "Let me share some of their private conversations with you," I said. "Here's a good one from last Tuesday. Eddie's such a pathetic loser. I can't wait to be done with him." Beth's voice rang out from the speakers, as I played an audio recording I'd made of one of her phone conversations. "He's so boring, John. All he ever talks about is work. You're so much more exciting." The room was silent now, everyone transfixed by the public destruction of two people's reputations. I could see phones coming out, people recording video and taking pictures. "And here's my favorite," I continued, displaying another series of text messages. "John to Beth. Once we get Eddie out of the business, we'll have everything we want. Money, success, and each other." John lunged toward me, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. "You bastard, turn it off!" I sidestepped him easily. 20 years of construction work had kept me in better shape than his soft office lifestyle. The truth hurts, doesn't it, John? Security guards were moving toward us now, but I wasn't done yet. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, "I want you all to know that Tate Brothers Electrical will be dissolving as of next week. John Tate will no longer be associated with any electrical work in this city. I wouldn't trust him to wire a doghouse, let alone your homes and businesses." "You can't do that!" John shouted. "It's my company, too." "Actually, I can. See, while you were busy planning your new life with my wife, I was planning, too. I bought out your share of the company yesterday. Turns out your girlfriend Sierra had some very interesting information about your recent business practices." Beth's head snapped up. "Sierra? What does Sierra have to do with this?" Sierra stood up from her table across the room, smiling coldly. "Hello, Beth. Enjoying your big night?" "You see," I continued, "Sierra was very hurt when she found out what you really thought of her, Beth. So she decided to share some things you'd told her in confidence, like how John's been padding his expense reports and skimming money from client payments." John's face went from red to pale in an instant. "That's not true. The accounting records say otherwise, along with the testimony of 3 clients who confirmed they paid John directly for work that never appeared in our company books." I turned back to the crowd. "So let this be a lesson to everyone here. When you're looking for electrical work, make sure you hire someone you can trust. Someone who won't steal from you, lie to you, or sleep with your wife." The security guards finally reached us, but I was already walking toward the exit. "Eddie?" Beth called after me. "Please, can we talk about this?" I stopped and turned back to her one last time. "There's nothing left to talk about, Beth. You wanted everyone to know how unhappy you were with me? Well, now they do. You wanted to be with John? Congratulations. You two deserve each other." I walked out of the ballroom, leaving behind the wreckage of 2 lives and 2 reputations. Behind me, I could hear the buzz of conversation starting up again, hundreds of people discussing what they'd just witnessed. By tomorrow, everyone in town would know the whole story. John and Beth would be social pariahs, their names synonymous with betrayal and humiliation. It was exactly what they deserved. As I drove home through the quiet streets of the city where I'd lived my entire life, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. The weight of secrets and lies and pretending everything was fine had been lifted from my shoulders. John and Beth had tried to destroy my life quietly, privately, thinking they could get away with it because I was too trusting or too stupid to fight back. They'd learned better tonight. I pulled into the driveway of my house now since Beth had moved out the week before, and sat in my truck for a moment, looking at the windows glowing warmly in the darkness. Tomorrow, I'd start rebuilding. A new company, a new life, maybe eventually a new relationship with someone who actually deserved my trust. But tonight, I was content to savor the taste of revenge served exactly the right temperature. Ice cold and completely devastating. John and Beth had gotten exactly what they'd asked for. They'd wanted everyone to know how they really felt about me. Mission accomplished.